In the name of one above all and with genuine regards and greetings to whomever watching, my name is Sepehr Dehkhan, undergraduate student of nanotechnology, and today's topic is nanotechnologies in nature. Fascinating, right? Well, let's dive into it. There are different topics of use and applications of biomimicry and nanotechnology in nature, basically on nanostructures, designs, functions, and applications, and we're going to talk about them in this session. Well, let's firstly see what biomimicry is. Well, biomimicry is the imitation of our nature. It means to modulate and design productions and systems and functions based on our ecosystem and all the biological entities in it. Well, it's fascinating because nature has all the time to make evolution and making systems to evolve. So evolved systems are better and more efficient with natural selection, and we could imitate and mimic them to make useful stuff. There are many terms that could participate in biomimicry topic. For example, design. As you can probably see, the architectural design of this dome is based on a lotus flower. Or in another example, we use different aerodynamics to design and remodel our aeronautics and flying systems like airplanes and jets. Or in the term of functionalities and functions, for example, bats and dolphins use a sonar, radiating, or echolocating systems. Echolocation is so important that we use in our radars, our sonar systems, in submarines, in airplanes, and in so many other technologies. Or there are many different functionalities that we could mimic and imitate from nature and biological entities. What nanostructures are really in the nature? Who knows? The nature itself. There is a spider living in Africa named Nephelia nerata, which hunts the pigeons for a living, which is fascinating because normally spiders hunt bees, flies, so many small insects, but this one aims for much bigger prey and predator. Well, why is it? How does it do it? Well, it's simple. These spiders secrete and create some sort of protein that makes the nanostructures of the spider silk. That's why it's very strong and yet very flexible. Or in another example, we could refer to butterflies. There is a butterfly called morpho butterfly, very beautiful, very blue. But what does make that blue color, the beautiful color on this butterfly's wings? Well, it's actually not pigments, it is the structure. I know it's very unusual, but some nanostructures can modify the wavelength refracting and reflecting of that surface, of that panel. And if the panel is a nanostructure, it will alter the wavelength of contacting photon, which means the butterfly's color is actually not because of its pigments. There is no blue pigment in the butterfly's wings. It's just the altering photon from a nanostructure on the surface of the wing. Fascinating, right? Another fascinating example is the peacock feather. Well, you've seen peacocks in zoos, or maybe even in nature, but actually the beautiful and astonishing colors on the peacock feather is not because of so many pigments, it is because the nanostructure of those feathers. Scientists use scanning electron microscopy or transmission electron microscopy to see and observe what those structures are, and yeah, there it is. You see the pictures. Those nanostructures alter the wavelength of the contacting photon, and thus you see so many astonishing color from the peacock feather. How about the green world? Well, plants, leaves, trees, they are not very behind from this technology. Indeed, we have lotus leaves. As you can see, lotus leaf is very hydrophobic. It means that it repels every droplet of water that you drop onto it. Fascinating, right? But how? How does it happen? I mean, it's not oily. how it repels the water, how is it hydrophobic? Well, it's simple. If you zoom in onto a leaf of a lotus, you'll realize there are so many pilaries, structures repelling the water from the surface, meaning it will levitate or it would be not touched. So, surface would be hydrophobic and it will repel the drop of water. So, what are the applications of these so many various different creatures and entities using nanostructures and nanotechnology in themselves? Well, applications are actually too much, and they're based on biomimicry. We imitate those structures in order to make precise and desired properties out of material, out of different subjects, and out of designs and systems and architectures. For example, one of the applications are the lotus leaves themselves. We use them to imitate and will make a fabric that is super hydrophobic, means the contact angle is more than 150 degrees. That's much. It means it repels the water droplets on it and it cannot get wet. So the wettability is so near to zero. And if you have a fabric used in nanotechnology or nanostructures, repelling water and hydrophobic structures, it won't get wet. So you have unwettable fabric. That's one use. Or in another example, you know the famous lizard gecko. Gecko can stick itself to any surface known, even better than a spider, even better than the Spider-Man himself. He could climb any smooth, any surface, anywhere. Even Teflon, which is polytetrafluoroethylene, and is very non-adhesive. But how does gecko can attach and glue himself to many different surfaces? Well, it's again simple. If you zoom into the gecko's fingers until you find very small spatulas on those setters, they will be connected to any surface by hydro or electrostatic adhesion, and that's how gecko can attach to anywhere. And for detaching it, it just needs to change the angle between that spatula and the surface, and it has some muscles for it. So it's very simple. If you erect the muscle, the erection will cause an adhesion on atomic level or molecular level with molecular adhesivity. But if you do not erect them or reuse them, it will detach from the surface. So that's how gecko can walk on so many surfaces, even as flat as Teflon. Well, now that we mentioned geckos, actually we synthesize some sort of nanostructures as tapes in a biomimicry and imitation of gecko's feet. Well, how does they work? Simple. As you can see the picture, the upper picture is the gecko's spatula, and we imitate those spatulas to make and synthesize the bottom picture, which is the synthesized form of adhesive gecko tape. And the picture is shown. And voila, we have a gecko tape that can glue to any surface anytime. Or in another example of biomimicry's applications, we can refer to oyster shell. All of you have seen oysters, and all of you have seen that oyster has variations of color, especially in its inner shell. Well, how those colors appear, it's because of its nanostructures. Well, what about other forms of life? You know oyster shells very well. You've probably seen too much of them. Well, it alters the wavelength that you see and it reflects from the inner shell of oyster. Well, what does it do? The importance of it is there are nanocomposites in there, and we could use those nanocomposites to imitate them in order to make some other nanocomposites usable in many different areas. For example, in our teeth, well, generally, but in dental industry and dental sciences. Dentists would be really happy. How about ourselves? Well, what if we zoom onto our own body instead of different creatures and different animals? Well, fascinating enough, If you do that, if you zoom into your own body, into your own cells, you'll realize that we're made out of trillions and billions of different nanostructures and nanomaterial at nanoscale, different proteins, various enzymes, various DNA, membranes, and so many other nanobiotechnological creatures. Well, that's actually a good point of view to look at, because at that point you'll realize we are nothing but assembly of innumerable amount of nanostructures and nanomaterials. So cells are actually nanorobots assembly, and good news is your body is made out of quadrillions of cells, meaning you are a robot, a nanorobot, made out of billions of robots, billions of tiny creatures, and billions of nanostructures. You are the best creature nanotechnology ever could made, the most complicated and the most sophisticated one, and also you are the higher form of nanotechnology. Well, that's something to be proud of, right? Thank you so much for your time and your patience, and I hope you've learned so many new stuff about nanotechnology, nature, and ultimately about yourself. You could find my email in the picture, and if you had any more questions, I would love and glad to answer them.